May God bless your day and your entire week as we begin this deep dive together.
Thank you. And yeah, it is great to be here to get into this one.
I really want you to start by picturing a scene with me. So imagine you are standing on a beach, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And it is just incredibly crowded, like wall-to-wall people pushing forward just to hear a single teacher speaking.
Just absolute chaos on the shoreline.
Exactly. In fact, the crowd is so dense, so physically pressing, that the teacher actually has to step off the shore and push out into the water on a small fishing boat just to be heard without being crushed.
Which is such a vivid image.
It really is. And from this makeshift floating stage, he starts casually dropping these simple agricultural metaphor stories about seeds and dirt.
Right, just everyday farming stuff.
Yeah. But here is the secret we are going to explore today. Those simple stories about dirt actually contain the entire architecture of the universe.
The visual contrast there is striking. I mean, you have a massive chaotic crowd, and the response to that chaos is a series of quiet stories about farming. It's so unexpected.
It really is. And we are exploring the 4th chapter of the Gospel of Mark today. To really understand what is happening on that beach, we are pulling from the extensive study notes found in 2 incredibly comprehensive resources, the Holman and the NAA Study Bibles.
Our mission today for you, the listener, is to decode these texts. We want to take these seemingly simple stories, these parables, and then a terrifying real-world event that happens immediately afterward, and uncover the profound mysteries hidden just beneath the surface.
Yeah, because the goal here isn't just to offer a surface-level recap of stories you might be vaguely familiar with. We're going to analyze why these specific narratives carry so much weight.
The historical context really changes things, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
Sure.
When you dig into the deep contextual details provided by these study Bibles, looking closely at the geography, the brutal economics of first-century farming, and the nuances of ancient Greek linguistics, it completely alters the frequency on which you hear this text. Okay, let's unpack this. To really grasp the message, we first have to understand the physical and cultural setting of the messenger.
Right, the Sea of Galilee.
Exactly. We are on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus steps into this boat, essentially using the water as a floating acoustic platform to project his voice to the masses.
It was basically nature's amphitheater.
Yeah, and the very first thing he talks about is a farmer. He launches into the parable of the sower.
Right, the one about the different types of soils.
Yeah, he describes a farmer scattering seed. Some of it falls on a hard path, some on rocky soil, some in thorny patches, and some on good soil.
And the study notes immediately clarify that Jesus is not offering an ancient masterclass on crop rotation.
Right, he's not giving them farming tips.
No, not at all. He is the sower. The seed itself represents the word, the message of the kingdom.
So what do the soils represent then?
The varying soils represent the human heart and its capacity, or I guess you could say willingness, to receive that message.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so the hard path represents a reality where the seed is completely exposed. Birds immediately swoop down and eat it, which the text explicitly links to Satan snatching the truth away before it can even penetrate the surface.
Wow, so it doesn't even stand a chance there.
Exactly. And then you have the rocky soil. This is where the seed sprouts quickly, but because there is a layer of bedrock just beneath the surface, there is no depth.
So it looks good at first.
Right, but when the sun comes out, the plant is scorched. The sun in this metaphor represents persecution or trouble.
It's like an emotional high, right?
Exactly. It is the phenomenon of an initial emotional high, a burst of enthusiasm that entirely lacks the root system required to survive actual adversity.
That is painfully relatable. And then there is the thorny soil. The seed actually grows here, but the native thorns grow right alongside it and eventually choke the life out of the crop.
And those thorns are very specific things.
Right. The study Bibles emphasize that these thorns represent the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and our endless personal ambitions.
Which is such a timeless problem.
I mean, think about how seamlessly that translates to your life right now.
Yeah.
We aren't usually dealing with literal agricultural thorns, but consider modern information overload.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the constant demanding pinging of our phones, our simmering career anxieties, or the cultural obsession with accumulating wealth. Those are our modern thorns.
That is a great way to put it.
They grow right alongside our best intentions and slowly choke out anything of actual lasting meaning.
Yeah, and if modern anxieties are the thorns, then first-century taxation, political oppression, and sheer survival were theirs. The human mechanism of anxiety is exactly the same, just operating in a different era.
So true.
But this grim reality sets up the stark contrast for the final soil, the good soil. This is where the seed finally takes root and yields a crop.
And the numbers he uses here are wild.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
It is the specific mathematics Jesus uses here that would have caused that first-century beach crowd to audibly gasp. He says the good soil yields 30, 60, and 100-fold.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. To put a 100-fold yield into perspective today, imagine opening your standard 5% savings account
Okay, yeah.
and finding that your investment had miraculously generated a 1,000% return overnight. It's an impossible dividend.
That captures the shock value perfectly. I mean, the notes in our sources emphasize the brutal economic reality of ancient Palestine.
What was a normal yield back then?
A normal good agricultural yield back then was about 5 to 10 times what was sown.
Only 5 to 10.
Yeah, if a peasant farmer planted 1 sack of seed, getting 5 to 10 sacks back was a triumph. That kept your family above the starvation line for the winter.
Wow.
So a 30-fold yield is a generational bumper crop. You'd be the talk of the village. But 100-fold, that is staggering.
It's mathematically absurd.
Exactly. It is an unheard of return. The study notes specifically mirror this moment to Genesis chapter 26, verse 12, where the patriarch Isaac reaps 100-fold in a single year.
Ah, so there is Old Testament precedent for that number.
Yes, in ancient Jewish thought, 100-fold yield isn't just good farming. It is the explicit, undeniable blessing of the divine. It is God-level math.
But, this brings up a massive tension in the text for me. If this seed is capable of producing a miraculous, universe-altering harvest, the sower's behavior makes no sense.
How do you mean?
Well, he is throwing this incredibly valuable seed everywhere. He's tossing it on the bedrock, in the middle of the thorn bushes, on the concrete, hard-walking path.
Yeah, he's not being economical with it.
Right. He isn't being careful or selective with it at all. Yet, it clearly doesn't take root in everyone.
Which is exactly why the disciples are completely bewildered. When the crowds finally disperse and they get Jesus alone in a house, they essentially confront him.
They want answers.
They do. They ask him why he is communicating in these cryptic parables.
And I have to push back here, too, because the disciples are asking the logical question. Doesn't this seem totally counterintuitive?
In what way?
Well, isn't a teacher's main job to make complex things perfectly clear? If you possess the most important message in the history of the world, why use a teaching method, these riddles, these metaphors, that intentionally acts as a filter?
Right. If we view teaching purely as a straightforward data transfer, yes, it seems entirely counterintuitive.
Exactly.
But the study sources highlight that Jesus is doing something much more complex. He tells his inner circle that the mystery of the kingdom has been given to them, but to outsiders, everything remains in parables.
Which sounds harsh.
It does, and he then quotes a notoriously harsh passage from the prophet Isaiah chapter 6, saying that people will be seeing they may see and not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand.
See, that sounds almost exclusionary, like he's intentionally trying to keep people in the dark.
It really does sound that way until we define the underlying Greek terminology. What's fascinating here is the specific word used for mystery, mysterion.
Mysterion.
The study notes are incredibly precise about this. In the context of the New Testament, mysterion does not mean some esoteric, secret ritual that you can only achieve through grueling human effort.
So it's not a password to a secret club?
Exactly. It's not that at all. It actually means a profound divine truth that was previously hidden from humanity, but is now being actively and openly revealed by God.
Okay, so it's a revelation, not a secret.
Yes. The parables, therefore, serve a vital dual purpose. On one hand, they do act as a judgment on those with hard hearts.
How so?
Well, if a listener is arrogant, apathetic, or just looking for a political revolutionary to overthrow Rome, the story of the sower just sounds like a quaint, irrelevant farming tale. They get bored and they walk away.
So the parable is a natural filter for apathy.
Precisely. It protects the truth from mockery, but simultaneously it acts as a compelling invitation.
For the people who actually want to know.
Right. For the person who is hungry for reality, the parable forces them to lean in. It creates a cognitive itch.
It demands that they ask follow-up questions.
Exactly. Just like the disciples did. It hides the truth just enough to filter out the cynics, but reveals it completely to anyone willing to put in the effort to seek it out.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because if the whole point of hiding a seed in the dirt is so it can eventually burst through the surface and grow, that completely changes how we view his next rapid-fire metaphors.
It changes everything.
You don't hide a seed to keep it a secret forever. You hide it to initiate a harvest?
And Jesus uses that exact logical progression. He moves immediately from the sower to the parable of the lamp.
Right, the lamp under the basket.
Yeah, he asks the room if anyone brings a small oil lamp into a house just to immediately shove it under a basket or a bed. And the study notes provide a great domestic detail here.
Oh, what is it?
The basket mentioned was a specific measuring container used in first-century homes holding about 7.5 liters of grain.
Okay, which raises the question, why would anyone ever put a 7.5-liter grain basket over a lit oil lamp in the first place?
Practically speaking, in a small peasant house with a highly flammable thatched roof, you might use a heavy clay or tightly woven basket to safely suffocate and extinguish a lamp at night without burning the house down.
Oh, so it's literally a tool for putting the light out.
Yes, Jesus is saying you don't spark a flame if your immediate goal is to suffocate it. You put it on a stand so things that are hidden in the dark can be brought out into the open.
So the ultimate goal of the hiddenness of the parables is eventual total illumination.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. He follows the lamp with the parable of the growing seed.
That one is so profound.
It is. The farmer scatters the seed, goes to sleep, wakes up day after day, and the earth just produces the crops. The farmer honestly has no idea how it's happening.
The linguistic detail here is the hinge of the entire parable. The Greek word used to describe how the earth produces the crop is automato.
Automapu. That sounds like automatic.
It is the exact root where we get the English word automatic. The kingdom of God grows without human engineering, without human anxiety, and entirely without human comprehension.
The farmer just rests.
Right. He rests, and the soil does the heavy lifting automato.
I mean, think of this like launching a powerful background process in a modern software algorithm. You, the user, don't need to understand every single line of the code.
You really don't.
You don't need to know how the processor is routing the data packets or, the exact biological mechanics of how a seed is germinating in the dark dirt.
Yeah, you just trust the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just execute the program, go to sleep, and let the algorithm work automatically to eventually reap the massive benefits of the output. We don't manufacture the growth, we just get the privilege of participating in the harvest.
That analogy captures the lack of human control perfectly. And to drive home this idea of massive, uncontrollable growth, he uses the parable of the mustard seed.
The smallest seed, right?
Yeah, he notes that it is the smallest of all seeds sown in the ground. But when it grows, it becomes the largest of all garden plants.
How big are we talking?
The notes clarify we aren't talking about a tiny garden weed here. We're talking about a massive, sprawling shrub that can reach 2 to 3 meters tall.
Wow, that's huge.
It gets so large and robust that birds can actually nest in its shade.
Okay, a 3-meter mustard shrub is a great image. But knowing how these texts work, those birds aren't just there for set dressing, are they?
Not at all. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the study notes highlight heavy, deliberate Old Testament imagery here.
From where?
Specifically pulling from the prophets Ezekiel chapter 17 and Daniel chapter 4. In ancient Jewish literature, a massive, towering cosmic tree with birds nesting in its branches was a universally understood symbol.
A symbol for what?
For a great world-spanning empire providing shelter for various conquered nations. Jesus is subtly subverting this expectation.
Oh, how so?
The birds represent the Gentiles, all the non-Jewish nations of the world. They will eventually find refuge, peace, and shade in the massive, entirely unexpected overgrowth of God's kingdom.
That is beautiful. It starts incredibly small, practically invisible to the human eye, but grows into a shelter for the entire globe.
Exactly.
So let's look at the narrative arc of this day. Jesus has spent hours sitting comfortably in a boat, looking at the shoreline, using nature seeds, dirt, weather, plants, birds, as beautiful, poetic metaphors for God's power.
It's been a very peaceful teaching session.
But then, as evening falls, we see this dramatic, terrifying shift in the text. They decide to cross the lake.
Yeah, things change fast.
And in doing so, they step completely out of the realm of metaphor, out of the safety of the classroom, and into a visceral, deadly, real-world demonstration of that exact same power.
They leave the crowd behind and head toward Gentile territory. And to understand the sheer terror of what happens next, we have to look closely at the geographical context provided by the Bibles.
Because the Sea of Galilee isn't a typical lake, is it?
No, not at all. It is essentially a massive basin sitting about 200 meters below sea level. But just to the north, you have towering geological formations like Mount Hermon.
And how tall is Mount Hermon?
It reaches an elevation of 2,700 meters above sea level.
That is a staggering, almost vertical elevation drop.
It creates a highly volatile wind tunnel. Freezing cold air rushes down the mountain ravines and violently collides with the warm subtropical air trapped down in the basin of the sea.
Which causes storms.
Yeah, this atmospheric collision creates sudden, completely unpredictable, and violently explosive storms. The text uses a Greek phrase describing a violent wind. The notes describe it as a hurricane-force tempest that practically turns the sea into a chaotic washing machine.
And we have to remember the resumes of the men in this boat.
Right, they aren't amateurs.
Exactly. These aren't naive tourists out for a sunset cruise. These are hardened, professional fishermen who have worked this specific body of water their entire lives.
They know what weather looks like.
If they are panicking, if they genuinely believe they're going to die because the boat is taking on water, it means the situation has moved past dangerous and into the realm of the catastrophic.
It was a life-or-death situation.
But amidst this absolute chaos, where is Jesus?
He is in the stern of the boat, asleep on a cushion.
Just sleeping through a literal hurricane.
The historical details in the notes here are phenomenal. First, the stern was where the pilot or helmsman would sit. In ancient Roman-style fishing boats, there is usually only one heavy sandbag or leather cushion kept under the pilot's seat.
What was it used for?
It was used primarily for ballast to keep the stern weighed down. The fact that the author mentions this specific singular cushion implies a direct eyewitness account.
Wow, like someone actually remembered it.
Yes, it is likely Peter, decades later, relaying this exact memory to Mark. Remembering a detail like a specific ballast cushion is a hallmark of a traumatic memory. It's Peter saying, I remembered the exact inch of the boat he was lying on.
It grounds the story in absolute reality.
It does. And the fact that Jesus is asleep shows his genuine, exhausting human fatigue after a long day of public speaking. But more importantly, it demonstrates his absolute unwavering trust in God's sovereignty.
The notes mention another sleeping prophet here.
Yeah, they draw a really sharp, intentional contrast here to the Old Testament prophet Jonah.
Oh, because Jonah also famously slept through a massive, life-threatening storm in the belly of a ship.
Exactly. But the motivations are completely inverted. Jonah was sleeping the heavy, depressive sleep of denial, actively running away from God's presence and his calling.
Whereas Jesus?
Jesus is sleeping the sleep of perfect peace, entirely secure in the center of God's will.
So the disciples, who were absolutely terrified, finally wake him up. And they don't politely ask for his assistance with the sails. They hurl an accusation at him.
They're angry.
They scream, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?"
This raises an important question about authority. Jesus wakes up. He doesn't panic. He doesn't grab a bucket to start frantically bailing water alongside them.
What does he do?
He simply stands up in the middle of a swamped boat and speaks directly to the hurricane. He says, "Peace, be still." Literally translated, it means, be quiet, be muzzled.
Wow.
And here is where the linguistic ties in the study Bibles bring this whole event into focus. This is the exact same Greek command Jesus uses to perform exorcisms earlier in Mark chapter 1.
Wait, really? He is addressing the weather using the exact same vocabulary he uses to address a demon.
Yes, he is rebuking the chaotic, destructive forces of nature with the same absolute cosmic authority he uses over demonic forces.
That is incredible context.
We have to understand that in the ancient Near Eastern world, the chaotic, raging sea was the ultimate symbol of untamable, destructive evil and chaos. Humanity could not control the ocean.
He was the ultimate terrifying force.
Yes. Furthermore, calming a raging sea is an exclusive Old Testament hallmark of God himself. If you look at Psalms 89 and Psalms 107, it is Yahweh alone who stills the roaring waves to a whisper.
So Jesus is making a massive claim here.
Jesus isn't just surviving a bad weather event, he is demonstrating divine prerogative. The text says the wind immediately ceased, and there was a great dead calm. Instantly, the surface of the water turned to glass.
So what does this all mean? Look at the incredible, almost tragic irony of the disciples' emotional state here.
The shift is jarring.
It really is. While the wind is howling and the waves are violently crashing over the sides of the boat, they are filled with the fear of the storm. But the moment the storm stops, when they are entirely safe, the text says they are filled with a great fear.
A different kind of fear.
Exactly. They aren't afraid of the weather anymore. They are absolutely terrified of Jesus.
Because they suddenly, viscerally realize that the power sitting inside the boat with them is infinitely greater and far more awe-inspiring than the chaotic power outside the boat.
And this connects so deeply to how we operate today. We spend so much of our energy, so much of our daily emotional bandwidth panicking over the external storms in our lives.
We really do.
We look at the chaos, the sudden medical diagnosis, the looming financial ruin, the broken relationship, and we are just frantically bailing water in an absolute panic, entirely convinced we are going to sink.
And we miss the point.
We totally do.
Yeah.
In all that exhausting chaos, we entirely miss the awe-inspiring reality of who is actually sitting in the boat with us.
Which brings this entire deep dive full circle. Remember how we started on the beach with the seed being planted in the dirt?
Yeah.
At the end of this chapter, the disciples are sitting in a perfectly still boat, soaking wet, whispering to each other, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?"
Such a powerful question.
The study notes point out that this question is the crux of the entire narrative. The seed of truth has been planted in their minds. They are experiencing the hidden truth being revealed right in front of them.
But they don't fully get it yet.
No, the harvest of full understanding, truly grasping that the creator of the universe himself is sitting on that leather cushion, it hasn't fully sprouted quite yet. The seed is still doing its vital work in the dark.
The automatic growth has started. The automotive is running in the background. We usually end the story right there, marveling at the calm water. But think about the reality of what happens next.
What do you mean?
Well, the wind is completely dead, the storm has stopped, but they're still in the middle of the lake. Jesus likely lies right back down on that cushion and goes back to sleep.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the disciples, they have to pick up the oars, they have to row the rest of the way to the shore in the dark, in total deafening silence, sitting inches away from the God of the universe.
That must have been a very heavy silence.
It leaves us with a profound question for you to ponder as you go about your week. When the uncontrollable storms in your own life suddenly stop, and the chaos finally goes quiet, how do you handle the silent, awkward rowing that comes next?
Are you still terrified?
Right? Are you still terrified, or do you finally know who is in the boat with you? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Mark chapter 4. May God bless all of you.